What is going on, comic fam? It's your boy, the bearded comic bro, and I am joined again by comic creator Mark Russell. Welcome back to the show, friend.
Oh, hey, thanks, Greg.
And I am, if you guys don't know Mark Russell, first off, you don't watch my channel enough because I talk about his books all the freaking time. But you're the creator of Not All Robots, One Star Squadron. You've got Dead Box. You've got, My Bad. You got so many different things coming out. Fantastic Four Life Story. Like, you're just putting out so many good books. And that was literally, I think I just named everything that came out this last month. So man, how do you juggle it all? How do you juggle all these books that you got working on, that you got coming out? How does that work, man?
Well, a lot of them I wrote a long time ago, in 2020 when the industry shut down temporarily because of COVID. There was a drought where nothing was being released, but I was still writing stuff. So a lot of that stuff didn't come out till a lot later. So you're seeing kind of a traffic jam of stuff I've been working on. But generally, I like to keep busy. I'm usually working on 3 or 4 titles at the same time, just because I wouldn't know what to do with myself otherwise.
And I want to jump into a handful of those titles. And last time I had you on the show, we talked about how you got into comics and, with writing the fan fiction and things like that for Count Chocula, which is great. And if you missed that interview, gang, go back, watch it. It's linked in this video. But have you always been attracted to comics? Like, did you grow up with comics, or was this kind of something you fell into more and you like, this is a medium I want to use to express stories? And that's kind of more your taste with comics?
More the latter part. I mean, I did rediscover comics in college because a friend of mine introduced me to like Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman and Frank Miller, and so I realized that I'd been drinking the cheap beer for all my life before, and then like there's some nice boutique craft beers out there too. So my opinion of comics, I was aware that there were good comics being made. My opinion of comics rose considerably in the 90s when I was introduced to these things, but I didn't really think of myself as being an aspirant comic book writer. I just thought of myself as someone who wanted to write. I initially imagined that I would be writing like novels and nonfiction books, but I just there's more money in comics. People will actually read a comic book in a way they won't just pick up like a tome of prose that you drop on a bookstore. And also I realized that it's a medium that works much better for me because it's so visual. And what I always hate about writing prose is trying to create a visual scene, describe things. I want to really just tell people what I think, and get into the dialogue and the plot. And comics takes all of that stuff I hated doing off my plate and dumps it onto like some poor artist who's then got to like make visual sense of what the story I'm telling.
I like it. I like it for sure. Well, so what is the process then for you? Because I know I listed off a whole bunch of books, but I mean, even in the last month, you've had a book with, DC, you had a book with Marvel, you had a book with Vault, Ahoy Comics. I think you had one with Bad Idea. So like, how do you navigate through like what stories go to what publishers, or how do you kind of pick and choose that?
Well, a lot of it is based upon the stories that I want to tell, and I figure out whether or not this is like a one shot or a series, or if it's like an idea that nobody will probably ever want to publish, but I'll keep it in my freezer just in case it becomes useful. So I have a folder called random shit on my computer where I just put all these ideas that I don't know when and where they're going to ever be used, but I just write them down there. And that's kind of my advice to writers: is always be, even if it's not, you don't have a fully formed story or you don't have like a book deal or something, when you have ideas, write them away because they will disappear if you don't write them down. And this file on my computer is like 200 pages long, but there's story ideas in there that like when somebody asks me, oh, I want like a one shot 20-page science fiction story, I can go through this folder and look at for like ideas that I have that might work. Or sometimes they'll approach me with a character and they'll say, we want you to do, like, for instance, with the Darkhold series, Marvel, they said, we want you to do a one shot about Black Bolt, and the theme is madness. It's got to go mad. So when you're approached by something like that, obviously I don't have like a Black Bolt story floating around in my personal folder, most likely. So when I'm approached like that, I think about the character, what it is that I think was their biggest vulnerabilities are, and what it is they really want from life, and then I try to build a story around the wants and needs of the character themselves.
Okay.
That's basically it. I try to figure out what medium works best with what story, like whether or not this story is enough to sustain a series, or it's a one shot, and then whether or not it's something that I can use with an established IP, or with something I got to do my own. Or sometimes most usually when they approach me with doing writing for a character that already exists, I'll just have to come up with a story from scratch.
Right. So it seems like some of them is that the publishers come to you and say, here's an idea that or here's a concept, that we want. Do you have something that fits that? Do you also have some of those stories though, that you're like, here's a story I want to tell? And then do you kind of say like, do you have to look at the publishers and like, maybe this is more of a story for, this publisher, or this one that like fits their kind of, model too?
Yeah, absolutely. It goes both ways. And typically the way it works is that when I'm writing a big 2 title, it's usually something they've approached me with and said, we're looking to do, a series, a mini series about superheroes in a superhero workplace. Or, and usually when it's me approaching the publisher, it's more like the creator-owned publishers saying, I want to do a story about a haunted red box DVD rental machine. And I think about, which publisher would be right for, like, say, like a horror story, and that's probably going to go to Vault.
Right.
And if I'm writing something goofy off the wall like Billionaire Island, I think that's probably going to Ahoy.
Gotcha. So the kind of, you've been around it enough that kind of what your stories fit with what publishers a little bit more better, and just take it that route.
Yeah, that's one of the good things about having, this proliferation of all these smaller comic book publishers. They all kind of got their own sort of identity. They all kind of got their own brand. And so, based on what kind of story you're writing, which one would be a better fit for which company.
Yeah. I got to talk to you about Not All Robots. So last time I had you on, we talked about Flintstones, and I spent a lot of time on Second Coming and Billionaire Island. But I read Not All Robots and was blown away by it. It was in my top 10 favorites of 2021. I know it's made a lot of people's top 10 lists and things like that. In the back of issue 1, you kind of talk about how it came out of this idea of an essay that you were writing in the midst of the Me Too movement. So, but like, if someone didn't get a chance to read that article, where did this kind of idea for Not All Robots kind of come about?
It started as kind of like a metaphor for toxic masculinity, that the idea that, like, men felt themselves to be the victims of the Me Too movement, when the Me Too movement was itself a response to the victimhood they had created. And so I wanted to do something that was sort of a metaphor for that. And what I came up with was like a world where robots have all the privilege and they have all the jobs, and yet they resent the humans who they basically lord over. And the story sort of grew from there. It's not just about that metaphor. I think in a lot of ways it grew to be more about how we tend to reduce each other to our economic roles in each other's lives. And that's why we resent each other, because we all see each other as either, somebody who doesn't respect us as people, or somebody who expects, us to do something for them. We all kind of tend to see each other as the help, which is not really conducive to healthy human relationships. So it became more about that, but that was where the genesis of the idea came from.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting that you talk about that, because when I made my top 10 video, issue 4 was the one that was solid. So issue 5 had come out just like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So I hadn't even read it when I put it in my top 10 list. And issue 5, it sealed the deal for me. Like you wrapped it up in a way that was perfect. And what I bring that up is because you just mentioned kind of how the tone shifted a little bit when you're writing, but you have this conversation with the robot, kind of the robot judge machine, and the mom of the family. And there's a line in there where, she says, we mistake productivity for value. And, this kind of how I just thought that was such a powerful statement and it kind of goes in with what you were saying about how, people work for us. And like, it's like, if you're, what can you do for me?
Yeah. And I think that's the way we tend to view people, especially in this country, that if you're not economically productive, if you're not making a lot of money, then your worth as a human being is nothing. And I think it's, in a way, when you look at people that way, it reduces us all, the people who are looking down on people included, to robots.
Yeah.
It's like saying you are nothing more than the value of your function.
Yeah, and then that idea though is as there's always going to be someone better that can do something better than you anyways, and that we're all replaceable, and so it's a horrible
Yeah,
mindset to have.
it's utterly self-defeating, because eventually, no matter how much of an alpha male you are, you will be replaced by somebody who's younger and better at some point.
Yeah,
So create a society that works for people who are going to be replaced, because that will be you someday.
yeah. It's it was such an interesting concept to see. And now you wrapped up volume 1, but it made the way you ended it, it makes it sound like you have ideas for more in this world. Is that true to say?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, we have gotten the green light to do another series of Nile robots.
Nice. So that's, I mean, just it's so cool too, because we spent a lot of time in the one bubble of Atlanta for most of the series, and we get to explore a little bit outside of that in issue 5. And so I'm just excited to see where you take it with with your storytelling too. So that'll be excited. Is that something that's going to be now in the works of 2022 now, or has that been already
Yeah,
already working in your mind?
I'll be working on it this year, and it will be more of like a Wizard of Oz type story, where they're getting out of the bubble cities and seeing the surrounding areas and going to other cities that are run differently. And yeah, it expands the world. At least the story I'm envisioning expands the world sort of greatly. You just saw like one little slice of it in Bubble Atlanta in the first 5 issues. You see a lot more in the next 5.
So how was it with like AWA when you were connected with them? Did you kind of say when you had the story, this idea, did they pair you up with Mike for art, or how did you guys get connected?
Yeah, they paired me up with Mike. It was actually Axel Alonso's idea, which at the time I had a hard time kind of seeing it, because I knew Mike's work from like Marvel superhero stuff. I thought, well, this is not real. It's not gonna be a lot of people punching each other. In, and so, but then he showed me some of his artwork, his other non-superhero artwork, and I just immediately got it. Like, oh, this guy's perfect. He can do anything. And sure enough, once he starts doing the artwork for Not All Robots, I just knew immediately, yeah, this is the right artist and the right look for the series. And yeah, it's really a testament to Axel's vision that he just sort of instinctively knew what sort of like art and what artist would pair best with the story.
That's cool to hear. Now I gotta ask, was it your idea or Mike's idea to make Donnie look like Michael Douglas from Falling Down?
All the character designs are pretty much all Mike's, so he takes credit for that. I think he did, like, one of the really cool things about it is like everyone in the family looks like so different, and you can kind of tell something about them just by looking at them. It's not like over the top. They're not like two-dimensional stereotypes.
Right.
But yeah, you can kind of like look at them and feel like you know where this person's going when you see them.
Yeah, like, and that's how it was. I mean, that was where my mind gravitated towards right there. I'm like, oh, and he's even going down a downward spiral anyways. I was like, this is crazy. So with your books here, you always, it seems to be like you talk about tough subjects sometimes that that make us reflect on ourselves, but then you also integrate it with your writing style with like bits of humor of, I mean, like even throwing in, I think it was in issue 1 of the robots with using the cheesy phrases that we use when we say goodbyes of like, see you later, Terminator, and after a while, rotary dial. Like, where for you in your writing process are you like, okay, how do I maybe soften the blow of some of these tougher stories that talk about with some of your humor that you put in, or like when the neighbor has the mandroid who's the neighbor's wife, like it looks just like her. Like where's that process for you when it comes to like, here's how I should put some of these things in it?
I don't know. I don't think too much about it. I don't
Okay.
really think, oh, this is too hard, I've got to soften. I just kind of say what I have to say. And if it's, harsh, then so be it. And if it's, not. But I think a lot of what my writing is just me sort of speaking the way I talk to myself in my mind. So
Okay.
it's just sort of my voice. And, my voice, I think the way I approach the world is kind of pessimism, peppered with, sort of like laughing at it as an attempt to not take it too seriously. I think,
Yeah.
like I read once that we evolved the ability to laugh from chimps who, or our common ancestor with chimps who they would laughter was their ability to announce that a danger had passed. Like they'd see a snake running up the tree, and then the snake, instead of coming after them, would keep going down the branch, like didn't even see them, and they'd be like, "Holy shit, that snake didn't even see me!" And then they'd like make this little hee 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 sound. They'd laugh as a way to like announce that the danger was gone. And I think that in a way that's kind of what the role humor plays in, especially when you're writing sort of dystopian science fiction. Even though the danger isn't gone, it allows you to sort of continue to operate feeling like you had a brush with death.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned science fiction, because last time we were talking, and you had said, like, you know, if you had a gun to your head, like, and it had to be pigeonholed into like what style you write, as you say, science fiction, because it's disarming for us as a reader. And I never read that, like, thought of science fiction like that, of putting ourselves and, you know, easing us into reading a story that's about us, or that we need, and, you know, not be offended by it as much. You're like, oh, like, yeah, they need these people are idiots, and it's like, oh, maybe it's us. But
no, I think writing a science. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think writing a science fiction story about robots is probably much more effective to getting into people's brains and getting them to think about things than, you know, marching into, like, you know, their house with the bullhorn and just, you know, shouting at them.
Yeah, and it just is so interesting, because ever since you made that comment last year to me, as I am reading your comics, I do look at it from a standpoint of, I'm like, you know, I'm reading it now going like, wait, is this about is this something, like, is this an issue that I have, or something I need to deal with? And I think that's such an interesting way to, like, that we can use the medium of comics to try and just say, like, here's something that needs to be said about world or society. And I think that's such a cool thing that medium allows that to happen.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes satire effective versus kind of just sort of overly aggressive and annoying is when you include yourself in the satire. When you say, this is what we are doing wrong, this is how we are coming up short, or how we have failed, as opposed to just like, well, it's all the fault of those idiots over there.
Yeah. So, and speaking of including yourself in the satire, just read One Star Squadron, where you include yourself in the comic.
I literally include myself. Yeah, because it's sort of based, that scene where I include myself, where Minuteman, the superhero, actually attends a Comic-Con to sign autographs. It's sort of based upon, you know, actual experiences I've had at Comic-Cons, where, you know, they have very different treatment for like comic professionals than they do for, like, you know, the film and TV professionals, where you're sort of in like the B list green room, where you're not allowed in like the fancy sort of VIP room. And I've been chased out of one or two. And yeah, so it's kind of based on that, where it's like, as the creator of a story, you are not somehow not eligible to partake in the same sort of privilege as somebody who maybe just played the character that you created.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the irony of that.
It was such a one of those moments. And that's, you know, I was like, I was wondering how much reality there was in that, because, you know, you have the scene of where you're sitting next to Minuteman at the Comic Con, and he's like, where'd you get that? Like, oh, at the VIP. And he's like, oh, I'll go. And he's getting kicked out, and they're like, we had to kick out a writer too, just a little bit ago.
Yeah.
But like,
hopefully everyone got that was a reference to me, because I've had that awkward situation where they approached me like, I'm sorry, sir, you need to have the magenta VIP badge to be in here. It's like, well, we need you to take your meatballs and leave.
It was so ironic though, because like you said, is you have the character who portrayed the character that he's portraying, the actual real life person, doesn't get the same notoriety as a person who
the guy who played
without him
gets to be in there and he does not.
Yeah. And so how often do you pull like moments from like your real life experience, or, you know, into comics? Is it more often than not? Or if you're like, this just fits for the story of I'm trying to tell, like you did in One Star Squadron?
Yeah, that one just fit. I rarely pull experiences from my own life, just because my own life is usually so boring. I just kind of sit at a laptop all day and write, and, you know, maybe go out for dinner. So I don't pull a lot from my own experiences, but I do pull a lot from my own observations. Obviously, the things that I've read, and things that, like, I know are happening that maybe aren't really story worthy, but I feel like in a lot of ways those are the things really matter to me and to other people, is the things, the sort of mundane injustices that happen all the time that we don't really recognize because we're so used to them.
Mm. So you mentioned earlier about how, like, DC approaches you about, here's something that we want to do. Do you have a storyline for it? And obviously, I'm assuming they approach you if they wanted to have some type of, like you said, superheroes in the workplace, which is where we get One Star Squadron. If someone's watching this and hasn't had a chance to pick up One Star Squadron, what's your kind of pitch about that book?
Well, it's about superheroes who are not big enough names to get the Hall of Justice treatment. So they have to work to make a living, work as superheroes. And they use sort of an Uber-like app for superheroes called Heroes for You in order to get gigs. And it's about how destructive the gig economy and the need to be chasing money is to their lives. And it was, like, in a way, sort of inspired by what I think professional athletes go through, because we only see the guys in the NBA and the NFL who make tens of millions of dollars, but there's thousands and thousands of people who never make it to that level, who have to deal with, like, chronic head trauma and injuries, and the fact that they're trying to grind out a career in something they love but that doesn't love the back, that's below the level of, like, the professional sports.
Yeah, that punches you, man. Well, it is one that I've thoroughly enjoyed. With these characters that you've come, that you had to bring into this story, were they ones that, like, there were some that, like, you knew right off the bat when you had this kind of idea of, like, I want this character, or was there some that you, like, I need to really research some obscure characters, or
I did a fair amount of research into obscure characters, and part of it also came down to which characters were available, which characters I could use. But what I really wanted was a lot of characters that look like they come from very different walks of life. So there's Power Girl, who is like an A-list superhero, could be, like, out there actually doing superhero work, but she has come to the conclusion that money is what really makes the world function. So she's decided to go into business instead of flying around saving people, because she sees villains like Max Lord and Lex Luthor, only getting stronger despite the fact that they don't have any superpowers. And she realizes this is what makes this planet run, is money. So I need to go where the money is. And then also, people like Red Tornado, who's like an android who's trying to learn what it is to become human, and he's using as his guides of what a human being should be, his old mentor Manhunter, and also the fact that he's rubbed shoulders with Superman. But I really wanted, like, a cast of, like, a lot of different types of superheroes, um, including someone who's, like, not really a hero at all, just sort of a guy who's in that realm, like the Heckler. And but yeah, just so, like, you get, like, a lot of different experiences. The Folded Man is in there, Flying Fox.
Yeah. And you have the Minuteman, which some of these characters, and I consider myself a well-versed DC comic nerd. I'm like, I don't even know some of these characters.
Originally, well, Minuteman was what I had to create, because originally I wanted to use Our Man.
Okay.
I said no, I couldn't use Our Man. So I came up with Minuteman, whose powers only last for 1 minute, which I thought was even better in a way, because it's even more pathetic.
And yeah, just the things you did. So some of these characters that you did create for this comic, as well as some like Red Tornado and Power Girl that you're like, nope, these are staples.
Pretty much all of the superheroes pre-existed this comic except for Minuteman.
Okay.
And I found out later there actually was a Minuteman, though he bore no resemblance at all to my Minuteman.
Oh man. Well, yeah, it's one that I highly enjoy. And I'm happy to see you working with Steve's again, because Flintstones, you worked with a Steve. You got
I recommend Steve's. Yeah, Stephen Byrne, Wonder Twins.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had good luck with Steve's.
So I mean, it was a shock to see you working with a Mike, when with AWA, because you're like, nah, he's a Steve guy. So you have you have all these different books that you're, currently working on right now, or not working on, that are coming out right now. Ahoy, you have My Bad right now, which is one that snuck under my radar, but has been a delight to read. If people have not checked this out, it is a fun look at the superhero take.
Yeah, it's probably the most fun title I've ever worked on, and part of it is because I'm not really trying to like talk about things that really bother me. I'm not really trying to like articulate my worldview. I'm just sort of like having fun with creating this sort of weird superhero universe. And I'm working on it with my buddy Bryce Ingman, who's co-writing it, and he writes half the story and I write half. So I only have to carry half the story, which is nice. And it gives me a chance to use a lot of these ideas that I had like sort of thought I was going to sneak into like a DC comic or something where they said, under no circumstances will this ever happen. But I can make it happen in My Bad, because I control that comic book universe.
That's so great. And yeah, I mean, you, like I said, you have a lot of stuff coming out right now that you're working on. As I want to respect your time a little bit as well. What are some of the things that that you still are looking forward to here in 2022, if there is stuff that you can talk about?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things I'm really looking forward to. Some of which I can't talk about, but one thing I can is I'm doing a spinoff of the Inkall for humanoids called Inkall's Psychoverse, and that comes out at some point in 2022 with art by Yannick Paquette. And some of the art he's shown me for it is just kind of mind blowing. And so I'm really excited for that, because I'm a huge fan of both Mobius and Jodorowsky, and just to be able to work in that universe is like a huge honor to me. So I'm excited about that coming out. And also another season, there's gonna be another series of Billionaire Island, so I'm excited for that, and a third series of Second Coming.
Nice. Good. I'm glad we're gonna, because I know when I had you on last time, you talked about how you had an idea, as you had like for 50 issues, and like you're just, they'll let me keep writing, I'm gonna keep writing. So because that was a lot of fun, because when I had you on last year, issue 1 of Only Begotten Son had just come out, and to get to kind of see this new arc that you had done this past year was just a really good world that you've created. And if you haven't checked out Second Coming yet, gang, you're missing out.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, it's Mark, you're on my list, as if I see your name attached to it, I gotta check it out. I just appreciate you with what you create. If people want to follow along with what you're making, what you're doing, what's the best way for them to stay connected?
Best place is Twitter, because I'm on there pretty much constantly. And my handle is @Manruss, MANRUSS, like I'm half man, half walrus.
That's great. Mark, again, thank you taking just some time, because like I said, I know you're busy. You probably had 4 more comics come out in the time of this interview. But
I'm like an insect, just breeding relentlessly.
But it's always fun to have you on the show and just talk about your books that you're writing. And I'm looking forward to what 2022 has to bring for comics from you. So,
well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, Greg. Fun
absolutely. So, gang, as always, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.